We are back from NTL with Joe Fantini, Marc. I'm John Robinson. There is so much going on in the world of mass torts right now. We're going to jump right into the trial of the year, I think. Social media addiction. Jury selection is underway. When will we see opening arguments, Joe?
Yeah, good question, John. So everybody's buzzing about this case. It was probably the most talked about litigation at NTL. We had a little bit of breaking news last week. Now we have two defendants who've settled, Snap and TikTok. Jury selection was underway, but we just got word one of the defense attorneys, one of the main attorneys, got sick over the weekend. And because of that, the judge dismissed the potential jurors. They're told to come back on Thursday. So it looks like on Thursday, jury selection is going to pick back up. The court's hoping that it's going to be paneled by the end of Friday, and then we could have opening arguments next week on Monday. Trials expected to last anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks.
This has been so anticipated. I'm going to be heading out to LA next Tuesday. I might catch the opening on Tuesday. Maybe if it happens on Monday, I'll be there the day after. But make sure you follow us on social. I'll be trying to report as much as possible what's going on during the trial.
Yeah, how does that work? Can we get seats? If we're in town, can we pop in and watch like a football game, or is it you have VIP passes to get into that?
It is closed. It's not live streamed. I think it's just talking to the attorneys after the fact and figuring out what's going on behind closed doors, if they'll even share.
Yeah, so that's how it's been followed in the news here. I've seen reports out of CNN kind of giving the weekly updates. It'll be really interesting. What I'm kind of paying attention to is whether one of the other big defendants settle. You know, with this a little bit of additional time, we have another weekend. We saw a lot of action last week. It's possible we hear about another defendant settling before things really kick off. But exciting trial. Everybody's anticipating this. Got some great attorneys. So looking forward to seeing what you learn next week out there in California.
No one wants to be last company standing, right? Snapchat settled, TikTok settled. We recorded live last week from NTL in the morning, and then by the time we got to the afternoon, TikTok had already settled out of the case. So things are moving super quick.
Exciting case, and we'll see what happens next week.
If you're listening to Tort Talk, you know that scaling a mass tort docket isn't about spending more. It's about spending smarter. At Aura Digital, we specialize in the high-stakes world of mass tort advertising. Over the past 3 months, we have launched 400 campaigns and signed up more than 16,000 cases for our clients. Whether you're targeting Roundup, Roblox,
For the next emerging MDL, go to rrdigitalmedia.com to grow your docket with verified, high-quality claimants.
All right, moving on to the next one, Roblox. The initial case management conference held before Judge Richard Seaborg in the Northern District of California on January 30th. What should we expect over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, this is another one of those kind of big tech, social media type litigations where we're seeing this kind of new frontier of mass torts. This one was just formed, like you mentioned, Marc. We had the initial case management conference, a little bit unique, but prior to the initial case management conference, the judge requested that attorneys submit applications for leadership. And so following the hearing, the judge appointed 3 co-lead plaintiffs. We have Brian Alstock out of Alstock Whitkin, probably most well known for the 3M litigation. We have Sarah London, who's out of Gerard Sharp. She's really heavily involved in Uber. And then the last third one, we have Alex Walsh out of Annapol Weiss, my old home. So they're the 3 that are going to be serving as co-lead. I really like the judge in this case. We like the venue. The judge is also requiring them to basically reapply every year for leadership positions, something we've seen in other MDLs. A little bit of a shocker. Marc Lanier actually did not get appointed co-lead. I can't remember the last time that happened. It looks like he's going to lead up the executive committee. We don't have formal appointment, but we'll have liaison counsel. Marc Lanier will be really involved in the case, which is great for everybody. But over the next 3 to 6 months, we have this initial formation of an MDL where leadership and the judge and the defendants kind of comes to agreement about what's going to be the roadmap for this case, what's going to be the discovery, what's going to be the short form complaint, what's going to be the master complaint, what's going to be the timeline for experts. So we'll hash that out over the next 3 to 6 months. Once we get some short form complaints entered and some real case management orders, we'll see some more filings coming in.
Excited to see this one picking up some steam.
In addition to Roblox, we actually did have 2 other mass torts really start last week. At the end of last week, the JPML had their initial conference, and we found out some information about both Lyft sexual assault, which is separate from Uber, and Cartiva cartilage implant. Can you tell us about what's going on there, Joe?
Yeah, so these are kind of the two new mass torts. We're waiting right now still for the order to come down. Everybody feels pretty confident that that Lyft MDL is going to be formed. They're asking for it in the same jurisdiction as we have the Uber MDL. That kind of just makes sense to everybody. Be able to meet the requirements, which the court usually looks at, which is the numerosity, the common defendants, the common injuries, the common themes. So with Uber being granted, they fought us tooth and nail on that. I don't see how this doesn't get granted. So we should expect that probably before the end of this week, that MDL being formed. I'd expect it to be out in California as well. Then the other one, that's basically a toe implant. So Stryker's the manufacturer in this case. It's a large toe implant. And basically, it came out initially about 10 years ago in 2016. Then as time went on, there were reports of failure. Some reports are high as anywhere from 60 to 80% failure rate. There ended up being a full recall by the FDA in October of 24. The cases have been going on in various federal courts, but now we have some more cases, so we're going for consolidation. Where we're at initially in the federal courts is the first trial supposed to be in the summer of 26. That could get kicked down if we get the MDL. My main concern about this one is kind of the numerosity. Usually it looks like the panel likes to see 25 or so cases filed before they do consolidation. I don't think we had that number, but since it's a common defendant, common injuries, it's got the recall. It could get granted. We're looking actually for West Virginia just because the case is so far along there. Not a venue we typically go to for MDLs.
25 seems very low. What do you usually see as like the smallest amount that gets consolidated?
Usually always double digits, right? I can't remember a case where it was under 10. Because one of those kind of elements that the panel looks for is the numerosity. So we want to be able to move forward and say, hey, there's so many different courts and judges dealing with these issues. Instead of wasting the resources across the country, let's get these consolidated now. So when you don't have the different lawsuits filed, that makes it a little bit harder. So usually, most times, the panel grants the request. Typically, we see it 60 to 70% of these requests gets granted off the bat. And when we're above that 25 number, that percentage goes even higher to about 80 to 85%.
All right, moving on to Roundup. While we're waiting for the Supreme Court argument later this year, we had an important decision come down out of Missouri. What can you tell us about this litigation, Joe?
Right. So the litigation's really focused out in Missouri right now. In the MDL, we're down to about 4,500 cases. Those cases are moving forward. The judge entered an interesting order out in the MDL, basically saying anybody who previously received an offer as part of the settlement program, they have the opportunity to reconsider it now that the Supreme Court is taking up this appeal. But really, the action in Missouri that you were talking about, Mark, as expected, Bayer said, hey, all of the trials should be postponed. We can't go forward with anything. We're waiting on this huge ruling from the Supreme Court. Let's stay everything. We can't do anything over the next 6 months. We have a similar motion in two cases. In one case, the judge ruled in our favor and said, it's not needed. Right now, we don't need to stay everything and wait for the Supreme Court to rule. We're going to be able to move forward. We're going to be able to move forward with discovery, other deadlines, motion practice, things of that nature. So that's a win for the plaintiffs because it keeps the pressure on the defendants. It keeps their attorneys working. It keeps them billing and spending money. So that was good momentum. Like we talked a little bit before, now is a good time to have conversations with the defendants about some sort of settlements. They have a little bit more leverage than they had with this potential Supreme Court ruling coming down. And then they also have been facing these huge verdicts. So I'm hoping we're going to start hearing about some inventory settlements. It would be challenging for a global, but now would be the time.
For those who are invested in Roundup, we're seeing some progress here. Hopefully we get to a resolution by the end of 2026. Thanks, Joe, for joining us for another episode of Tort Talk. Best 10 minutes in mass torts each week. Make sure you follow us all over social media, YouTube. Get the latest updates as soon as they hit the platforms. We'll see you guys next week for Tort Talk.